Concurrent players, user reviews, AMD, Nvidia. There's a whole bunch of things to talk about with Starfield now that the game has been out-ish in its early access over the weekend. I've put a good few hours in myself, so let's just jump right into it. Thing number one. It's actually performed some pretty damn stellar numbers, if you will. 245,000 peak players on Sunday on Steam after the early access launch. And that truly is impressive because that's all people who are paying additional money, right, above the normal cost of the game to play it that way. Yeah, a lot of people went for that upgrade. The prospect of just having a uninterrupted weekend of playing a new RPG is clearly something that a lot of people value very highly. Then we had 543,000 concurrent viewers on Twitch on the Thursday before launch, and that's actually quite impressive. This makes it the 42nd highest concurrent views on the platform for a game, but the thing that I would point out is this is actually the highest for a first-party title for a major console manufacturer, so that absolutely is showing that, yeah, this can be that big heavy hitter for Microsoft. Because again, all of this stuff is based on the game being only available in premium early access. I mean, even as of this morning, 110,000 people. That's a lot, and as it went from Friday through to Sunday, you did see that peak number in Steam just slowly increase. It'll be fascinating then to see what happens when the big swell of people who just own the game normally or are picking it up through Game Pass actually get in. Now, because this is technically early access, it does mean that we do not have Steam user reviews to go off or anything like that. Because really, I normally say that right now we're looking at the people who are impatient and are hardcore. But those numbers are absolutely big, even for a game's straight-up full launch. So I wonder then, will all these people act as a bit of a beacon, kick off that strong network effect that will then cause more people to pile in over the coming weeks? And certainly I think Game Pass is a massive part of this. Personally, I have the game on Game Pass, and yes, I did get the premium upgrade. I wanted to put some hours in decently early so I could actually talk about the game properly with you guys. Here's what's really surprising though. So UK physical game sales are still something that are tracked, right? And if you look at them, the Starfield premium upgrade is actually at number 7 in the UK top 10. Now, who's getting the premium upgrade? I suppose people who bought the normal edition of the game and have become impatient, or people who, well, yeah, have Game Pass and want to get the premium so they can play it right now. So that absolutely is an impressive thing. And also, as VGC are reporting, there's really good numbers in the States as well. Overall then, by the numbers, this is pretty damn tremendous. I think this will be the largest first-party release that Microsoft have had. It'll probably validate that acquisition of ZeniMax for them. But to go into the actual game itself, performance is something that we do have to talk about. I mean, from my perspective, if an Xbox Series S can run at a 1080 30, surely a Series X could do 1080 60 or something like that. I certainly do struggle with how the game's presentation is. I'll be honest with you. As much as whenever you're up close to things, the detail is really quite impressive. I will say that there is just that feeling of there being a Vaseline smear across the game. And oddly enough, one of the solutions that there could be to that is to put a little bit more Vaseline on, because technically, their motion blur implementation is pretty good, but as many, including Digital Foundry, have pointed out, to quite a few players, they might actually want the option to put more of that motion blur in. Now, in the past, based on my experience 10 years ago, I would say always turn that shit off, do not use it. Now though, modern implementations of motion blur are actually fairly good. By the way, if you're watching a film and it's projected at 24 frames per second, the reason why that motion actually looks okay to you is because when the camera is moving, right, whatever the shutter speed is at, that is letting light in continuously, and that gives you this very natural motion blur. It just works. It makes sense to your brain. Now, that's why if I was to say shoot a film, right, and I was to play it back at, say, 24 FPS, but if I was to set my shutter speed to be a 200th of a second, you would be wondering why, you can see every frame, and every frame looks, perfectly still, because the motion is being frozen. And to your eye, to your brain, that doesn't look right, because that's not how we perceive motion, in real life. So kind of those implementations of motion blur, they're trying to mimic what a camera does to make a film sort of feel okay, and that all works with how our brain visually processes stuff. So there's been quite a lot of talk about 30 FPS. The 30 FPS on consoles, though, is, I will say, like a fairly solid one. After about 4 hours, I had adjusted to it, but certainly I felt that the combat experience was severely hampered by the 30 FPS option. I definitely would take less visual quality, lower draw distance, any of those things, if it meant I got that better frame rate. Now, as has been, I think, tradition lately, PC though, man, we're not looking so good on PC. It's a little bit more strange. Look, bugs-wise, there are still bugs. Comparatively, though, it's a very good situation, right, compared to the past Bethesda games. However, the FOV, I mean, man, the FOV, I really struggle with it in console, especially when you're indoors, you're playing FPS, you're at 30 frames a second. Because that field of view is really tight, you know, it's kind of like you've got the blinkers on, and that means that motion is really exaggerated, and it can make combat feel like quite an overwhelming experience versus, say, being used to playing Battlefield at 144 hertz with, you know, like an FOV of 105 or some crazy shit. So the good news is there is no FOV slider, but there are mods to give you one, and of course, in traditional Bethesda fashion, there is an INI file that you can, you know, configure some of those settings at yourself. Looking at the actual benchmarks, though, things are definitely tricky. I mean, on ultra settings, good luck getting 60 FPS, especially if you're on NVIDIA. So, the lower end of cards are definitely suffering here, right? So there's that side of things. Mid-range cards, broadly managing if you're okay for like 1080 or maybe 1440p, but lower settings, right? And you're kind of okay with, you know, with the upscaling. Can you just brute force it with a 4090? The answer is yes, but you will not get the frames you think you should be able to get. I believe there were some bugs, at least initially, on the NVIDIA side. Now, for AMD, comparatively, AMD is doing fairly well. There was obviously a closer tie between the companies in development, which would mean there's a closer tie between the engineers working on this game and the engineers over at AMD. I suppose to ensure that those drivers are in a good state and that the game itself, you know, will be well tested against AMD hardware. But I think one thing that we're absolutely seeing now is the crutch of upscaling, right? There's a reason why we're now using DLSS and even dabbling with frame generation. It's because the raw raster performance, I mean, 4K Ultra with a 4090, which is basically a supercomputer inside your computer, you're looking at an average FPS of 68. But I would contend, you know, it's not the average you should care about, it's the 1% lows you should care about, right? Because what you want is an amazing 60, and you are not even getting that. 24 gigabyte VRAM, 4090 sitting in there, 46 frames per second. For the 1% lows as found by Gamers Nexus. The 7900 XTX 24 gig also sitting in there with broadly comparable performance. Now, you do then see the 7900 XT outperforming the 4080. So overall, what you're getting here is, yeah, this is a pretty damn hard game to run. To be honest with you, I do not think that this is I think that this is a well-presented game. I particularly enjoy the art direction of the game, especially how a lot of the lighting that they've handled. I mean, from an artistic standpoint, a lot of how they have handled just like the little, you know, clutter objects. You know, normally in games when you walk up to a whiteboard and it's often just undiscernible gibberish. If you walk up to a whiteboard and you inspect it closely in this game, you will see the stuff those characters wrote. And it will look crisp. It will almost look like real life on your screen. So there's, you know, I don't know how well optimized that is, but there certainly is a lot of very well presented things in here. So it's hard to know exactly what the bottleneck, you know, could be with this game. We'll probably need some more detailed testing. Of course, what would be ideal is, you know, if you could get like a proper performance profiler, like, you know, what they'll have in their own game engine, then we could start to understand what parts of the presentation are, you know, are causing cards to struggle. Absolutely, though, once again, the PC gaming side of things is totally leaning on DLSS, FSR, frame generation technologies as well to try to get performance to where they want it to be. And I do think that kind of sucks because as much as that tech is very impressive, yeah, quite a few of us can actually see artifacts. You know, DLSS 2, like, if it's on and it's, set to like higher performance, you really can notice that. Now, one bit of good news is that AMD FSR 3 is going to be available to NVIDIA 20 and 30 series cards. Of course, those are cards that DLSS 3 is not available to. So I think the hope there for a lot of NVIDIA gamers, maybe with a 2800, maybe 2700, or even say like, a 3070, is that maybe they can get a little bit more life squeezed out with FSR 3 once that's something that they are able to use. And then, yes, as for the current state of NVIDIA, there have been problems. Also for Intel Arc, pretty damn large problems. Intel saying that they are aware. Broadly, look, Arc, when the drivers are good, they can actually be pretty good bang for the buck. The sad thing is we have seen some leaked stuff that perhaps suggests Intel are going to be scaling back their plans for Arc going forward, and I think that is a terrible shame because, the more competition, the merrier. Right now, it is an unfair race between NVIDIA and AMD. It would be really nice if Intel were able to actually go and, spook NVIDIA a bit. That said, they really will have to catch up because they did not release drivers ahead of Starfield. Yeah, ouch. Now, of course, it's a Bethesda game, and one of the things that comes along with that is modders fixing a lot of things, and this is where stuff is great. There are already 393 mods on the Nexus for Starfield. That's only 3 days after release. The number 1, 2, 4, 7, and 13 are all different types of performance enhancement. Rank 1 and 7 are options to replace FSR2 with DLSS or XESS, which I believe that's NVIDIA's one, right? And then the 6th option is an FOV slider, which of course the INA file is fine. A lot nicer if that's a part of your in-game UI. And this truly is the power of things. I hope whatever way the Game Pass version is packaged, that I will be able to mod that on PC. I have to assume that'll be the case. But yeah, even things like skipping the launch logos. I mean, in a game with this many loading screens, hey, if I can get rid of the epilepsy warning so I can just get into the game, that's fine. Yeah, so modders once again absolutely doing the good work, and of course the saucy work, because yes, I did also notice that MXR, after like a year and a half, has came back to making mod videos, and I think we all know why, so that's all rather funny. Of course, the question then is, if modders can just give us DLSS like near immediately, why can the engineers and the team not do it? Look, this is a thing about focus. You have dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens and dozens and maybe hundreds of people who can just go and, do that mod for the game. Whereas for the engineers, you don't have a humongous number of engineers, to be real with you. The production team of this game is like 280 people. I don't know exactly how many, graphics engineers there will be, but hey, let's just say you're a team of 20 people. Yeah, it might take a day or 2 days to get that in. Or maybe it'll take like a day, but we'll have to go through a whole bunch of testing, certification, yada, yada, yada. Or, maybe you'll have to rebuild the game to test it or whatever it is. The people have already got tasks on their list, right? It's just one of those things. If you have free time and know how to implement DLSS and you can just go and do it, that's fine. It's easy for you to do that because you don't have 50 other things crowding out your attention because you're managing the launch of a game. And as we know, this is a game that, yes, does not have a Bethesda tier number of bugs, but it still does have bugs. So that's why those people, on the team will, they'll have a whole bunch of tickets that they've got to deal with. We can't see that, but it does mean that to us, it's like, come on, dude, you can just put DLS in. It'll take no time. It's a little bit more complicated, but modders still are there to do it. As for when we play the game, I think, it's been interesting. One thing that I've enjoyed, and I haven't actually got into right now myself, is the shipbuilder. But of course, we've seen, Slave 1, Imperial Star Destroyers, Prometheus from Stargate, UNSC Forward onto Dawn from Halo 3, Millennium Falcon, Normandy, Ebon Hawk, some Star Trek-related stuff. Who knows? Maybe I'll try to make the Rocinante. Maybe I'll just try to make Battlestar Galactica. Maybe. Who knows? Maybe I'll make a Viper to zip around space in. Maybe that wouldn't be too practical. Anyhow, it's actually a pretty damn awesome creator. I was pretty surprised with what you can achieve with the character creator. Here is Todd Howard himself, and I don't know what I'm going to use for today's thumbnail, but I did grab that image, and I used an AI upscaler, so I've got this like HD fake gamer Todd, which maybe I'll use, who knows. But there are criticisms that pop up, and let's just talk about the opening structure of the game first. So a lot of people are finding the first like 12 or so hours of the game to be quite problematic, and it's kind of of the usual thing with the Bethesda game where it's like, yes, do you go from being in a mining situation to fighting a bunch of pirates with your immediately acquired gun skills to then joining a society? It's like, yeah, it all happens in an hour. To be honest with you, I get why it's kind of unfortunate. I didn't mind it too much. In the back of my head, I also know that people will make an alternate start mod for the game. Not that should be an excuse. Look, it's whatever. It's what I said in the title of my previous Starfield video. I just called it Starfield is a Bethesda game. And I knew, like, this title is loaded as hell and very factual. And it absolutely is the case. It is hitting most of the things that I would want from a game like this through the lens of, it's a Bethesda game, so you still do have all of those things that you would expect, right? Your opening can be a little bit, a little bit iffy. For a lot of people, the proc-gen planets, those can be some repetition there. And I think that's one of the things that I would like to talk about, paired in with the structure of the game, in how with, it's like loading screens and stuff like that. It's not really a space game, and the feeling of travel isn't there. One of the things I think in Skyrim and Oblivion that really wowed people is like, oh, wow, there's a mountain, I can go to it. And how do I go to it? I just go in a straight line and then glitch, jump up it, whatever. But that was the thing that was kind of mind-blowing to people. Whereas in Starfield, we have highly segmented play spaces. And I understand why. This is 64-bit, as I say, Star Citizen, but so Star Citizen, I know a lot of people, rightly are very critical and skeptical of it. I will say that a lot of the problems I've had to deal with in Star Citizen, like getting, a bunch of server persistence going with having the insane scale of that game, and the fact that, you can seamlessly fly down to a planet where you'll see a mixture of hand-authored and procedurally generated content, but, it has to be in a way where it's like consistently like that all the time. They're kind of doing the real deal, and that is hard. Whereas in Starfield, your whole land anywhere on a planet, it's going to feel a little bit more like, say, Shogun 2 Total War, where it's like, yep, I clicked battle, my character is here, over a river and a hill and a forest there, and it will, generate for you a map that broadly looks like that. And so here, they're not doing the real deal. They're using a lot of procedural generated, proc-gen tools to kind of give them bulk, and they put their handcrafted stuff around that. But because the game is so segmented, where, you look at a planet, you'll have a few POIs that you can fly down to, but you don't actually fly down to them. You basically just hold the X button and you teleport there. And this is problematic for, I think, a number of reasons. One of the things that is impressive to people in Star Citizen, when it's only happening in one space system, right? But it's the idea of, let's say, I'm here and I want to go to New Babbage. You'll leave, you'll set up your quantum drive, and you hit the go button. Might take you 10 minutes to get there. And there you go, whoosh, going across space. But what's cool in Star Citizen is the way that it all feels real to people, because you're sitting there in your cockpit, in your little, quantum drive, whatever the hell it's called. You can press a button, get up and walk around your ship while your ship is still going that way. Someone can interdict you. You can shoot them down or whatever. You can then open up your ship, fly out of it in your spacesuit and go into the other person's ship, and it all literally happens. Whereas in a game like Starfield, you shoot a ship until its engines go down, you go near it and you hold the dock button, then you get a weird canned animation, and then, you pop into it like it's a little mini dungeon. The reason why Star Citizen, to the people, and if you want to know why people have thrown so much money at that game, it's these sort of things I'm saying to you now, that even through all the problems, there's this level of scale and authenticity that they really enjoy. I suppose a level of simulation. And for a lot of people, that makes the space experience feel real. Also, look at a game like Elite Dangerous, where to many people that's grindy and tedious. To many other people, they're like, well, I want American Space Truck, or American Trucker, but, in space, right? Starfield, though, it ain't that. So as an example, let's say you are in your constellation, little secret society lodge, which looks lovely, by the way. Man, I love the decor of that place. Love the design elements. Anyhow, it'll be a loading screen to leave that, and then you'll go to your ship, loading screen to go into your ship. You want to take off, loading screen to take off, to go somewhere else, loading screen to go there, look at the planet, loading screen to go there. Or you could bypass all of those loading screens by just, you're sitting there in the lodge, you bring up your, maybe your quest list, you go to an objective, you hold the X button, it immediately plots a course there, shows it to you in your galaxy map, and then you hit the button, and then you're there. It skipped all those loading screens and all those steps. But then that's kind of a problem, isn't it? Because space now feels tiny because you're basically teleporting between little volumes of play, right? You're just teleporting and zooming about the place. And to a lot of people, that does break that level of immersion that was present in prior Bethesda games. Certainly if you played the game in, past games in PC, and you maybe use some of the mods that made towns seamless. So you actually, if you wanted to go into Whiterun, say, you would not have a loading screen. You could just go into it and it would be there. That's one of the cool things modders did on PC. Whereas, a lot of those things that to me sort of feel like a bit of engine limitations, but also them choosing constraints. Because this is a game that swole to its full production size in 2020. It's now delivered in 2023. So evidently, it's one of those situations where, you'll say, right, we are going to take all of these downsides, knowing that players will identify those downsides. And what we purchase for the price of those downsides is our ability to make the game and ship it in the way that we think we can, which is how we now have this game, where even though in so many ways the Starfield itself feels smaller. Skyrim was small, but it felt big. Starfield is very big and it feels small. But once you go past maybe the first 12 hours, sort of starts to dawn on you just how much authored content there is in the game. That, I think, is where this game starts to appeal more for people. I think that's especially because quite a lot of the side content is actually interesting. The game's lore is actually interesting. As Gene Park, I believe, I forgot what outlet he writes for, but he said, wow, I got to New Game Plus, and this is near level of New Game Plus implementation. So there's a lot to love. There's a lot of quality in this game. But the load screenitis, that is rough. It is rough because it breaks up your experience, and it's rough because, as an example, if you're playing the Spider-Man games in PS5, when you want to fast travel somewhere, you're there. Bam, you're there. Instant. It feels amazing. We've just got used to these amazing load times. And now that's not something we're getting. Then, of course, you've got No Man's Sky. I've seen a lot of people saying, No Man's Sky did this shit 7 years ago. How do they not do it? How do those fools at Bethesda not do it? And you see, the thing there is, they're making this with their set of pipelines, tools, technologies, etc. that led to them having the creation engine, being able to make these games with lots of handmade content. If you look at No Man's Sky, No Man's Sky did this 7 years ago. And how good was the launch of No Man's Sky? Because they didn't have the content. They did have the procedural generation. They did have the seamless flying about the place, and that's all very impressive. It's very, very impressive indeed. It's like the wet dream version of what my final year, programming course was, or at least the project that I chose for that, which was terrain generation that I applied to little planetoids. It was all very fun, and looking back on it, man, what a terrible implementation I had. Anyhow, they did that, but they didn't have the content, and all the procedural planets just slowly smooshed into one and felt all the same. Whereas that's not the case in Starfield, right? So just because No Man's Sky did it does not mean that Bethesda should be able to do it. It's quite interesting because do you know what this game is? And people have talked about how the Starfield is Skyrim meets Mass Effect, and they have no idea how on the money they are, because Mass Effect Andromeda in its early versions was supposed to be a similar situation with all of the procedurally generated planets, essentially a hyper-ambitious version of the planetary exploration of Mass Effect 1. That ended up not playing nice with the Frostbite engine. They had to humongously cut the scope down to being the few planets that we got. And I think it comes down to what you would personally like. For me, I would actually prefer a far smaller number of star systems, right? And more detail in the ones that are there with a higher degree of simulation. But this is the direction that they went in, and this is how they made it with the tools that they had. At the end of the day, if they had to massively rework those tools, develop new core, modules of their engine from the ground up, then this game would be a very long way off. It would not be out now because those things would bottleneck full production. Because you try to do all that shit at once, it goes completely awry, as we saw with Mass Effect Andromeda. Whereas right now, they made this game, and they will be able to merrily hop along to the Elder Scrolls 6. So, in a way, it is what it is, but absolutely when I say Starfield is a Bethesda game, warts and all. Actually, Bethesda games are games that many of us love. Warts and all. And as for the true power of Starfield, to cap things off, it did in fact save a Redditor and their family. Titty Killer, I think that's how you pronounce, Tidy Killer, there, that's far better. They basically were staying up all night to play Starfield, but that actually meant that he was awake at 2 a.m. to hear his downstairs neighbor's apartment catch fire. It then spread up to his apartment while his family was asleep, and thankfully, because this person was up late, there you go. They were able to get people out. So not only does Todd Howard bring us video games, he also saves lives. That's a joke. This person did the life savings. Very good. I've had a similar situation. One night I was here, eating Domino's pizza, 3 in the morning, I think, in the office. And I look outside and I'm like, normally the sky's not orange. So I look out the window and there's a humongous fire plume, arcing up, like 5, 6, 7, 8 meters. Really, really tall. You'll know about bonfires in Northern Ireland. So a whole bunch of bonfire materials were laid up against a fence. And they caught fire. And I won't say any more just so I don't sort of identify the office, but oh boy, glad I was able to call the fire service when that happened, and, landlord's building wasn't destroyed along with all of our things in it. Quite something. There you go. If you need an excuse for why you are staying up too late playing video games, just say it's Firewatch. So there you go, Starfield. I need to put more hours into it, frankly. I do look forward, though, likely in an upcoming Roundup episode, we will be able to talk about the Steam review, how that's shaking out, and what sort of concurrency numbers we see once the game has got general availability. Because very much it won't be, all the people who bought early access, they'll buy that in day 1, or maybe day 2 because of peer pressure. But you're not going to buy early access to Starfield like 2 days away from proper launch. That would be a very silly waste of money. So the fact that these concurrency numbers are so strong and continually are really holding, that's from a cohort of players who bought in at early access launch. So I think that does prime us for a big, big killer swell of players. So overall then, hey, congratulations to Todd Howard and the team. It is nice to see them return to their core competency in making, these big RPGs. There is that era with Fallout 76 and everything, but as we know, with the likes of Redfall from Arcane Austin, a lot of that did come from ZeniMac's top brass. Well, here they are, able to really do their core good thing. Good thing again, and I hope they ship a performance mode for the Series X, and I cannot wait to see what modders develop, because see a lot of these issues players have got loading screens. I've got to wonder, will modders be able to deal with some of that? Because they were able to remove the load screens between some, just going into a town in some of the other, like the Elder Scrolls games. They were able to do that. And I just wonder with the creation tools, what is there for space combat? What is there to give people that feeling of space instead of being a sort of an interplanetary teleporter, which is kind of what it feels like now with how liberal the fast travel system is. All fascinating then. Let me know, what are your thoughts and experiences? Of course, stay tuned to the channel. We will have plenty of coverage as the weeks go on. Have a great day, and I'll see you next time.